The shriek of shattering glass jolted Derek Mitchell awake at 6:17 a.m. He bolted upright, heart hammering against his ribs as the sound of splintering wood followed. Stumbling out of bed, he rushed to his front window just in time to see a familiar figure storming away from his now decimated garden gnome collection. Patricia Winters, the self-appointed queen of Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. Patricia's perfectly highlighted bob bounced with each determined step as she marched back to her immaculate colonial across the cul-de-sac. The garden gnome massacre wasn't random. Derek knew exactly what had triggered this morning's destruction. Yesterday's EVOA meeting had been the breaking point. For 3 years, Patricia had ruled Oak Ridge Estates with an iron fist clutching a clipboard. Her infamous violation notices appeared on doors for infractions as minor as garbage bins left out 7 minutes past collection or mailbox posts painted the wrong shade of Oak Ridge-approved forest green. "This is utterly unacceptable," Patricia had declared at yesterday's meeting, standing at the community center podium with military posture. Mr. Mitchell's so-called garden ornaments have exceeded the permitted lawn decoration limit by 13 items. Derek had risen from his folding chair, meeting her icy stare. "The bylaws specify a limit on flamingos and wind chimes, Patricia. There's not a single mention of gnomes in the HOA agreement." The room had fallen silent. No one challenged Patricia, ever. Her husband, Roger, the community's most successful real estate developer, sank lower in his chair, avoiding eye contact with everyone. "Well," Patricia had said, her smile tightening into something dangerous, "perhaps we should put it to a vote." But the unexpected had happened. When hands raised around the room, Patricia found herself outnumbered. Her face had flushed crimson as she gathered her designer handbag and stack of violation notices. "This isn't over," she'd whispered as she brushed past Derek. "Not by a long shot." Now surveying the wreckage of his prized gnome collection, Derek was thankful he'd installed the security camera last month. He pulled out his phone and checked the footage, crystal clear evidence of Patricia's early morning rampage. What Patricia didn't know was that Derek had become quite friendly with Roger Winters during their weekly golf games Patricia assumed Roger played with his business associates. Derek had learned things about the Winters household that would shock the neighborhood. Roger had confided his growing dissatisfaction with his marriage and Patricia's increasingly tyrannical behavior at home. Derek took one more look at his shattered window, pulled up Roger's number, and hesitated only briefly before pressing call. The neighborhood dynamics were about to change dramatically. Across the street, Patricia poured herself a mimosa with trembling hands. The rush of adrenaline was fading, replaced by the dawning realization that she might have gone too far. She acted impulsively, driven by a fear she couldn't quite name. The fear of losing control, of becoming irrelevant. The HOA had given her purpose, identity, and power when everything else in her life felt increasingly empty. Her phone buzzed with a text from Roger. "Need to talk. Dinner tonight." Patricia's stomach tightened. Roger never initiated serious conversations. Little did she know that the security footage from Derek's house was already making its way through the Oak Ridge Estates community group chat. By noon, Patricia's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. The neighborhood watch group chat had exploded with notifications, but oddly, no one was responding to her morning message about unusual activity on Maple Drive. She frowned at the screen, noticing several neighbors had left the chat altogether. Something was happening, and for once, Patricia wasn't in control of the narrative. She straightened the lapels of her blazer and dialed Meredith from across the street, her most reliable ally in HOA enforcement. The call went straight to voicemail. Next, she tried Eleanor from the beautification committee. Again, voicemail. Patricia's perfectly manicured nails tapped anxiously against her marble countertop as unease settled in her stomach. Meanwhile, at the local coffee shop, Derek sat surrounded by 5 neighbors, all leaning forward as they watched the security footage for the 3rd time. The crystal-clear video showed Patricia approaching his front yard at 6:12 a.m., surveying the gnome collection with visible contempt, then methodically destroying each figurine before hurling a garden rock through his window. "She's gone completely off the deep end," whispered Eleanor, shaking her head. "Last month, she issued me a violation for planting unauthorized perennials. They were the exact flowers she suggested at the spring planting seminar. She cited me for an unapproved mailbox," James added. "Then I discovered she owns stock in the only company that sells the approved mailboxes." Derek nodded, sipping his coffee. "Roger's been telling me things have been difficult at home. Apparently, Patricia's behavior has become increasingly erratic." "What are you going to do?" asked Meredith, whose own run-ins with Patricia had resulted in 3 landscaping overhauls in 2 years. Derek's expression turned serious. "I'm filing a police report this afternoon. But first, I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting for tonight." Across town, Roger Winters sat in his real estate office, staring at the video Derek had sent him. 20 years of marriage to Patricia had trained him to anticipate her moods, to navigate her controlling nature. But this was something else entirely. He loosened his tie and buzzed his assistant. "Cancel my afternoon appointments," he said quietly, "and call my attorney." Patricia, oblivious to the gathering storm, was busy drafting new violation notices. If the neighbors thought they could undermine her authority, they had another thing coming. The HOA bylaws were sacred text to Patricia, at least when they served her purposes. She'd spent years amending them to strengthen her position, adding clauses so specific they might as well have named the targeted neighbors directly. The doorbell rang, startling her. Through the peephole, she saw Officer Martinez from the Community Policing Unit. Patricia smoothed her hair, plastered on her most charming smile, and opened the door. "Officer Martinez, what pleasant surprise. Is this about my report of suspicious teenagers at the community pool?" The officer's expression remained neutral. "No, Mrs. Winters. I'm here regarding an incident that occurred this morning at 1478 Oak Ridge Circle. We have video evidence suggesting your involvement in property destruction and vandalism." Patricia's smile froze on her face. There must be some mistake. "Ma'am, we have clear footage of you destroying property and breaking a window. I need you to come down to the station to make a statement." As Patricia's world began crumbling around her, her phone chimed with a notification. The HOA group email had just announced an emergency meeting for 7 p.m. The subject line read, "Vote of no confidence, HOA presidency." Roger's car pulled into the driveway and Patricia felt a cold wave of dread wash over her. The look on his face as he approached the door told her everything she needed to know. Her carefully constructed facade was about to come crashing down around her. The Oak Ridge Estates Community Center hadn't seen this many residents in attendance since the contentious vote on building the neighborhood pool 3 years ago. Every folding chair was occupied, with latecomers standing along the walls, whispering among themselves. Derek arrived precisely at 6:45 p.m., manila folder tucked under his arm containing printed screenshots from his security footage. Patricia and Roger entered at 6:57, just minutes before the scheduled start. The chatter immediately hushed. Patricia held her head high, designer handbag clutched tightly against her side, but those who knew her well could see the slight tremor in her usually steady hands. Roger walked slightly behind her, his expression unreadable. "What is the meaning of this emergency meeting?" Patricia demanded as she approached the podium, attempting to take her usual position of authority. "As HOA president, I should have been consulted before." "That's precisely what this meeting is about, Patricia," interrupted Eleanor, standing from her seat in the front row. As HOA vice president, she had never before challenged Patricia so openly. "Your leadership position is under review tonight." Patricia's face flushed. "On what grounds?" Derek stepped forward, connecting his laptop to the projector. "On the grounds of abuse of power, selective enforcement of bylaws, and personal property destruction." He glanced around the room. "And based on the turnout tonight, I'd say many residents have concerns they've been afraid to voice." Roger quietly took a seat in the back row, separate from his wife. Patricia noticed her eyes narrowing slightly before she turned back to face the room. "This is preposterous. I devoted countless hours to maintaining property values and community standards in Oak Ridge. If a few of you can't be bothered to follow simple rules." The projector flickered to life, cutting her off mid-sentence. The room fell silent as crystal-clear footage showed Patricia's early morning rampage through Derek's front yard. Several gasps echoed through the community center as they watched her methodically destroying gnome after gnome before hurling a rock through his window. Patricia's mouth opened and closed, no words emerging. The timestamp on the footage was unmistakable. 6:12 a.m. that very morning. "I was issued a citation at 8 a.m. today," Derek said quietly, holding up a violation notice with Patricia's signature. "For excessive lawn ornaments and broken window creating neighborhood eyesore. You destroyed my property and cited me for it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Patricia gripped the podium, knuckles white. This is being taken out of context," she stammered. "That collection was a violation off. Section 5, paragraph C of our bylaws limits excessive lawn ornaments specifically to flamingos, wind chimes, and seasonal inflatables," recited Meredith, holding up her copy of the HOA agreement. "Garden gnomes aren't mentioned anywhere." More residents began speaking up, one after another. "You fined me for planting non-approved flowers that you yourself had recommended. You cited my basketball hoop but ignored the identical one at your alley's house. You threatened to put a lion on my house for being 3 days late on HOA dues when I was in the hospital." As the testimonies continued, Patricia's composure cracked further. She looked desperately toward Roger, but he avoided her gaze, staring intently at his hands. Eleanor stepped to the podium beside Patricia. "I move for an immediate vote of no confidence and the removal of Patricia Winters as HOA president, effective immediately." "I second," called out James from the middle row. Patricia's world was collapsing in real time. Everything she built, her carefully cultivated position of authority, was disintegrating before her eyes. What the neighbors couldn't see was the deeper fear driving her panic. Without the HOA presidency, who was she? What value did she bring? The control she'd exerted over Oak Ridge Estates had filled a void she couldn't bear to examine. As hands raised throughout the room, Patricia caught a glimpse of Officer Martinez slipping in through the back door. Their eyes met briefly, and Patricia knew that her problems extended far beyond losing her precious HOA position. The vote was unanimous. Patricia Winters, for the first time in 3 years, was no longer president of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. She stood frozen at the podium, watching as Eleanor was swiftly nominated and elected as interim president. The meeting continued around her as if she had already vanished. Mrs. Winters, Officer Martinez said quietly, approaching her as the residents discussed forming a committee to review and simplify the HOA bylaws. "We still need your statement regarding this morning's incident." Patricia nodded mechanically, gathering her belongings. As she moved toward the exit, neighbors she terrorized for years with violation notices and threats of fines turned away from her, conversations hushing as she passed. The community center door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded like finality. In the parking lot, Roger waited beside his car, separate from hers. "I think it's best if I stay at the lake house for a while," he said, his voice oddly gentle. "My attorney will contact you tomorrow." Patricia felt her world narrowing to a pinpoint. "Roger, please, this is all a misunderstanding." "No, Patricia, it's not." He opened his car door. "I've ignored your behavior for too long, making excuses, trying to smooth things over with the neighbors behind your back. This isn't just about the HOA or even this morning's incident. It's about who you've become." She watched him drive away, then followed Officer Martinez to the police station in her own car, mind racing through potential explanations, justifications, anything to salvage the situation. The knowns had been a violation. Derek had provoked her at the meeting. She was just enforcing the rules everyone had agreed to follow. But as she sat in the stark interview room, the officer's questions sliced through her rationalizations. Yes, that was her in the video. No, she didn't have permission to enter Derek's property. Yes, she had knowingly damaged his possessions. Yes, she had later issued him a citation for the damage she caused. "Mrs. Winters, do you understand that this constitutes criminal mischief, trespassing, and filing a false report?" Officer Martinez asked, her pen poised above the paperwork. Patricia stared at her manicured nails. "Will there be charges?" "That's up to Mr. Mitchell. He's indicated he's willing to discuss restitution instead of pressing charges." The following morning, Patricia woke to an empty house and a neighborhood that had transformed overnight. From her window, she watched as neighbors who had barely spoken for years chatted animatedly across driveways. Children rode bicycles freely along sidewalks where she'd previously issued citations for unapproved recreational activities. Her phone remained silent, no HOA emails to send, no violations to document, no committee meetings to control. At precisely 10 a.m., her doorbell rang. Derek Mitchell stood on her porch, looking somber but composed. "May I come in?" he asked. Patricia stepped aside wordlessly. They sat in her immaculate living room, the silence stretching between them. "I calculated the cost of the damages," Derek said finally, sliding a paper across the coffee table. "The window, the known, some landscaping that was trampled. If you're willing to cover this, I won't press charges." Patricia glanced at the figure. It was substantial but fair. "Why are you pressing charges? You have every right to." Derek studied her for a moment. "Because I think there's more going on here than HOA politics. Roger mentioned you've been struggling since your daughter moved away and your position at the architectural firm was eliminated." Patricia's eyes widened. She told no one about losing her job 6 months ago. "The HOA became your whole identity," Derek continued gently. "But terrorizing neighbors isn't the legacy you want to leave in Oak Ridge, is it?" Something cracked inside Patricia then, a wall she built so carefully around her fears of irrelevance, of aging, of being overlooked. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could catch it. "I don't know why I'm without it," she whispered, the admission painful in its honesty. Derek nodded. "That's something worth figuring out. And you know what? The neighborhood would benefit more from your actual architectural expertise than from you measuring grass height with a ruler." For 3 days, Patricia barely left her house. She paid Derek's restitution with money from her personal savings, money she'd been setting aside for a kitchen renovation that suddenly seemed meaningless. She watched from behind curtains as Eleanor led a community cleanup day, residents working together to refresh the neighborhood entrance that Patricia had micromanaged for years. On the 4th morning, she found a thick envelope in her mailbox. Inside was a stack of HOA violation notices, every single one she had issued over the past 3 years, with a handwritten note from Eleanor. "The past is the past. The new HOA board votes tonight on revised bylaws. Your professional input would be valuable, if you're willing." Patricia read the note 3 times, emotions churning. Her phone buzzed with a text from Roger. "Meeting with divorce attorney today, unless you prefer to try counseling first." She sat on her perfectly landscaped porch, staring at the neighborhood she tried so hard to control. Across the street, Derek was installing a new window, his ruined gnome collection gathered in boxes nearby. Making a sudden decision, Patricia crossed the street. "Need some help?" she asked quietly. Derek turned, surprise evident on his face. "I'm almost finished, but sure." They worked in awkward silence for several minutes before Patricia spoke again. "I've been thinking about what you said, about my architectural background." Derek nodded, waiting. "The playground at the community park doesn't meet current safety standards. I noticed it during my rounds looking for violations." She paused. "I could draft some plans for an update. Pro bono, of course." "That would be unexpected," Derek replied cautiously. "But I think the new recreation committee would be interested." Meanwhile, across Oak Ridge Estates, the neighborhood was undergoing its own transformation. Without Patricia's ironclad enforcement, residents began making small, personal improvements they previously feared would trigger fines. The Chen family planted a vegetable garden. The Rodriguez children set up a lemonade stand. The Williams house finally got a fresh coat of paint and a shade that would never have met Patricia's approval. That evening, Patricia arrived at the community center 15 minutes before the scheduled meeting. She carried a portfolio of preliminary playground designs and a knot of anxiety in her stomach. Conversation stopped as she entered, neighbors eyeing her with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. Eleanor approached her first. "Thank you for coming, Patricia." "I'm not sure everyone feels that way," Patricia replied, noticing several residents deliberately turning away. "Give them time," Eleanor said. 3 years of tension doesn't disappear overnight." The meeting began and Patricia sat quietly in the back row, listening as the interim board presented simplified bylaws that focused on safety and property values without micromanaging personal choices. When they opened the floor for community input, Patricia hesitated before raising her hand. The room fell silent as she walked to the podium. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. "I'm not here to challenge the new direction," she began. "I'm here to apologize." She took a deep breath. "My enforcement of the HOA rules was excessive and often personal. I used regulations to control rather than to build community." Some residents exchanged surprised glances. Others remained skeptical. "I'd also want to offer my professional expertise," Patricia continued, opening her portfolio. "The community park needs updating, and I've drafted some preliminary designs that meet current safety codes while adding features for children of all ages and abilities." She placed the designs on the table, stepping back without further comment. As she returned to her seat, she caught Derek's eye. He gave her a small nod of acknowledgement. After the meeting, several residents cautiously examined her playground designs, asking questions that Patricia answered without her former condescension. For the first time in years, she was engaging as a neighbor rather than an enforcer. As people dispersed to their homes, Roger appeared in the parking lot. Patricia approached him warily. "I heard about the meeting from Derek," he said. "He mentioned you'd offered to redesign the playground." Patricia nodded. It seemed like a good first step. "First step toward what?" Roger asked. She considered the question carefully. "Toward finding out who I am when I'm not controlling everything and everyone around me." The city council chambers were packed beyond capacity. Residents from Oak Ridge Estates filled every seat, lined the walls, and spilled into the hallway outside. At the podium, Michael Porter from Ridgewood Development finished his slick presentation with a confident smile. "In conclusion, this development will bring much-needed housing to the area while providing significant tax revenue for the city. We've addressed all technical requirements for the variance and expect the Commission's favorable vote. Thank you." The zoning commissioner nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Porter. Now we'll hear from the neighborhood representatives." Patricia approached the podium, dressed in the professional attire she hadn't worn since leaving her architectural firm. She placed her materials on the stand, took a deep breath, and began. "Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Patricia Winters, a resident of Oak Ridge Estates, and a licensed architect with 15 years of experience in urban planning." Her voice was steady, her demeanor composed, nothing like the shrill, demanding persona she'd embodied as HOA president. For the next 10 minutes, she methodically dismantled Ridgewood's proposal. She presented traffic studies showing the development would increase congestion by 45%. She highlighted discrepancies between the developer's environmental impact report and independent assessments. She demonstrated how the proposed building violated 3 specific sections of the city's own master plan. But most importantly, Patricia continued, this variance would set a dangerous precedent for ignoring established zoning ordinances whenever a developer wants an exception. Zoning exists to protect community character and provide predictable development patterns that residents can rely on when making the significant investment of purchasing a home. As she spoke, neighbors who had once feared her violation notices watched with growing appreciation. Patricia's attention to detail, her insistence on rules being followed, traits that had made her a neighborhood tyrant, were now being wielded in defense of their community. After she finished, other Oak Ridge residents took turns sharing concerns. Eleanor spoke about infrastructure strain. Derek discussed the inadequate parking provisions. The Chens raised issues about stormwater management. Each speaker referenced specific sections of Patricia's comprehensive analysis. When the public comment period ended, the commissioners looked visibly affected by the organized opposition. They questioned Porter about several points Patricia had raised, his smooth confidence gradually eroding under their scrutiny. "We'll take a 15-minute recess before voting," announced the head commissioner. In the hallway, neighbors surrounded Patricia, offering congratulations and gratitude. Roger stood at the edge of the group, a proud smile on his face. "That was impressive," he said when she reached him. "It reminded me of when you testified against that shopping center development near the historic district. Same passion, same preparation." Patricia felt a flush of pleasure at the comparison. That case had been one of her proudest professional moments, securing a compromise that protected historic buildings while allowing appropriate development. "The difference," she replied quietly, "is that I'm doing this with the community, not against." When the commission reconvened, their vote was unanimous. The variance request was denied. The Oak Ridge Estates contingent erupted in cheers. Porter approached Patricia as people began to disperse. "You're a formidable opponent, Mrs. Winters," he said, handing her his business card. "When you're ready for a real challenge, give me a call. We could use someone with your skills and determination." Patricia pocketed the card without comment, turning instead to the celebrating neighbors. As they walked to the parking lot together, Eleanor linked arms with her. "We couldn't have done this without you, Patricia." "You would have found a way," Patricia demurred. "Maybe, but not as effectively." Eleanor hesitated before continuing. "The board has been discussing creating a new position, a neighborhood liaison for development and zoning issues. We'd like to nominate you." Patricia stopped walking. "After everything that happened, because of everything that happened," Eleanor corrected. "You've shown us what you're capable of when your talents are directed toward building up rather than tearing down." Later that night, as Patricia and Roger drove home, she noticed something unusual in their neighbors' front yards. One by one, as they passed each house in Oak Ridge Estates, she saw garden gnomes positioned prominently on lawns, porches, and flower beds, even on properties that had never displayed decorations before. "Did you know about this?" she asked Roger, who was smiling broadly.